We are up to chapter 9, Beasts, Bugs and Bedlam. Bedlam means craziness. Chaos rippled across the zoo. Sirens echoed. Staff ran everywhere. None of them seemed hello Tyrion. None of them seemed sure what to do. "This is bad," said Leo, watching in shock. "Bad is one word for it," said Abby, scanning their surroundings. 5 giraffes suddenly appear out of thin air in the middle of a zoo. Almost makes you think it happened just for us. "But they didn't just appear out of thin air, did they?" said Leo. "Those giraffes had to be turners." "You got that right, but it's not night yet. And apart from you, turners only ever turn at night and never out in the open like this, unless something made them turn against their will." "It's my DNA," said Leo, touching his severed ear. He tried to push back the sick feeling rising in his stomach, the feeling that what he had just witnessed was the next stage of the disaster that had started in the caves at Camp Stillbone. "Don't jump to conclusions, Leo." "It has to be," he said. "We know I'm the only day turner in the world. Gonzalez stole my DNA. Now he's using it to somehow set off spontaneous turns in broad daylight. But how does a sample of your DNA suddenly make a bunch of random people turn into giraffes on the opposite side of the world?" They were interrupted by a French voice booming out over the zoo's PA system. "They're telling everyone to evacuate," said Abby. They watched as the nervous crowd started to stream towards the exit gates. "What do we do?" said Leo. "Have you still got a turn in you before sunset?" asked Abby. "I think so," said Leo, looking up towards the sky. His last turn had been the disaster on the plane, and although he was jet-lagged, if a turn was needed, he would do his best to conjure one. "Good," said Abby, heading against the tide of people hurrying towards the exits. "Time to break a few rules." Leo and Abby peered through the barred windows of the zoo's central security building. A guard sat at a desk with his back to them, frantically yelling into a microphone as he watched a wall of security monitors showing crowds scurrying around the park. "I don't think this is a good idea, Abby." "Hello, Monkey Butt," said Leo, crouching behind the branches of an enormous fern tree. "That's because it isn't," said Abby. "It's a bad idea, but it's also our only idea, so let's do it. Remember the plan we discussed?" "You mean the plan we talked about 30 seconds ago?" said Leo. "Yeah, I remember it. You created a diversion while I steal the hard drives for the zoo's security cameras." "Correct." "Wouldn't it be better if I created a diversion and you stole the hard drives for the zoo's security cameras?" "It might be," said Abby, "but I'm older, so I'm in charge. Also, it will be easier for you to sneak in as an animal." Leo bristled at Abby's reasoning. "And remind me again why we need the security camera footage," he said. "So we can see exactly how those 5 giraffes turned up," said Abby, "and then destroy the evidence." Every instinct told Leo that Abby's plan was doomed to fail. Plus, he was starting to worry that maybe he didn't have another turn in him after all, and that if he forced another one before tomorrow, the consequences might be worse than a few lingering grey hairs. "What if I refuse to do it?" he said. "What if I kick your stupid butt?" Leo considered this option for a moment. "Okay, let's do it." Abby tiptoed quickly around to the front of the building, took a deep breath, then ran inside and knocked on the door. Leo watched from the window as the guard glanced up briefly from the security cameras. The guard was still talking urgently into the microphone on his desk, no doubt with the team of zookeepers chasing the rogue giraffes, Leo assumed. Abby kept pounding on the door, but the guard barely glanced away from the monitors. Leo could see a huge stain of sweat down the man's back. Keeping his eyes glued to the screens, the guard poured himself a glass of water from a large jug on his desk, drank half of it, then kept shouting into the microphone. He briefly glanced towards the doorway where Abby was thumping and getting louder, but he didn't stop talking into his bank of monitors. "Hey!" Leo heard Abby shout. "Què?" shouted the guard. Abby kept thumping on the door. "Què?" yelled the guard again. When Abby kept continuing knocking, the guard stood up irritably, tripping over a cable of the microphone. He stumbled hurriedly over to the door and yanked it open. Before he could say anything, Abby began talking to him in a barrage of broken French. This had been the plan. Abby was would convince the guard that she was injured while Leo turned, squeezed through the bars of the open window and grabbed the hard drive. A chipmunk would do it. Leo had turned into a chipmunk a couple of times. They were fast, agile, and surprisingly strong. Abby's diversion was not going well. The guard was shooing her out the door like he was swatting away a persistent fly, while Abby threw urgent glances in Leo's direction, gesturing for him to get a move on. Now, mouthed Leo incredulously. He worried that the guard would come back to his seat at any second. Indeed, the man was already trying to close the door. Abby shot an irritated glance at Leo and nodded furiously. Just as the guard was about to shut the door on her, she groaned in garbled French and slumped to the ground. The guard swore, or at least Leo assumed he did. The language was different, but the intonation was clear. He knelt over Abby, checking her pulse. Then Abby turned. Then Leo turned. Terribly. The urgency of the situation, combined with the after effects of his calamitous turn on the plane, had messed up his turning rhythms. Leo knew from experience that it was never easy to turn into exactly the animal he wanted. Before Camp Stillbone, he had thought he was starting to master the process somewhat. But if the camp had proven anything, it was that he was still in danger of turning randomly. And this one was random, horribly random, and utterly ill-suited to the task at hand. Just as Leo tried to poke his nose, which was now an elongated red proboscis, through the bars, the guard glanced over his shoulder and saw Leo's face at the window. Only not Leo's face, the face of a mandrillus sphinxus, the mandrill monkey. To lay eyes on a mandrill in any circumstances is to see evolution at its most mischievous. Though often mistaken for a baboon, the mandrill is more like a monkey in clown makeup. Hello, Tyrion. Its enormous white snout has a striking red line straight down the middle, leading to two giant huffing nostrils. Beneath these, a bristly white beard frames a set of pointed yellow teeth. Its olive-green fur stands up on end so that it appears to be wearing an afro wig around its outrageously repellent face. And if you also happen to lay eyes on it from behind, you cannot help but notice that its backside almost entirely resembles its face. But it was Leo's mandrill face that the guard saw now. The harried man who already had his hands full before Abby had collapsed on the floor of his office, realized that he now had an escaped mandrill to deal with too. Le monde est devenu fou, shouted the guard, which roughly translated means the world has gone mad. And certainly from the guard's point of view, it very much had. Leo had a bigger problem. Apart from being about the most conspicuous primate on the planet, he was far too big to squeeze through the bars of the window. Plus, he was having trouble resisting the urge to skulk away into the nearby garden in search of some beetles to chew on. At that moment, Abby opened her eyes and saw Leo. "You doofus!" she exclaimed in French. "Vous du vas!" and slapped her head in dismay. The guard took this insult to be directed towards him, and he spun backwards. Abby also began shouting it. Let me try that again. The guard took this insult to be directed towards him, and he spun back towards Abby and began shouting at her, also in French. That's much better. Leo saw this as his chance and decided on a whim to go with his backup plan. It was his backup plan alone, but he hoped that Abby would see the sense in it and follow along with it. Only later would he concede that improvising a backup plan is perhaps not the best idea when your mind is trapped inside the brain of an insect-eating primate. Without a further single thought, he grabbed a bug bomb from his backpack and lobbed it through the window. Oh, remember those bug bombs that hit water? Oh, I hope it lands in that jar that the guard was drinking out of. Okay, that is the end of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 is called The Depths of Disgustingness. Oh, I'm assuming the bug bomb might have gone off.